Thank you. Okay, folks, I'm Carol Lisbon, Chair of the Dover Planning Board, and I'm going to open the meeting at 7:02 p.m. We are meeting via Zoom per instructions and authority from Beacon Hill. So as part of that process, I will take a roll call of the planning board members. Scott Friedman.
Here.
George Sidgwick.
Here.
Jody Shu.
Here.
Val Lynn.
Here.
And Carol has been here. We also have Laura Harbottle, interim town planner, and Sue Hall, our administrative support. And we're going to start now with our first item on the agenda, which is the easements with an application I hope you've all received from Beth and Mike Benjamin, who are on the call. So thank you very much for showing up and appearing tonight. Welcome. So what I'd like to do is allow you to tell us what it is that you want to do and why, and give us any information you'd like to share with us.
Sure. So when we bought our house in 1998, we realized that there was an easement, a bridle path that went along our property and our neighbor's property to the right of us, down our driveway basically, and then down the hill to the bottom of our property and went along the edge of the property with two properties that were on Pine Street. And when we first moved in, this bridle path connected to another path that was on a property off of Walpole Street. In last year's town meeting information, there was a slide deck that showed the different easements that the town was going to possibly talk about accepting. And I noticed at that time that the continuation easement across the property on Walpole Street had been taken away, discontinued, which meant that our easement, our bridle path, literally came down our driveway, down the hill, along the neighbor's backyard along Pine Street. So you're deep sort of in the midst of lots of neighbors' backyards, and then it ended. It didn't go anywhere. So it's basically a path to nowhere. And we'd like to have it removed because we don't feel that there's a need for it within the town.
Yeah, we've lived here 23 years and no one has ever taken this path.
And I think the other thing too is we've not been required to maintain it as a path as such. The trees on the hill have been allowed to grow so that it would, so the hill doesn't slide down into the neighbor's backyard down. And I think it would be kind of a difficult, it wouldn't benefit anyone, or not benefit, that's not the right word. I'm not sure anyone would see the reason why they might want to walk down this path. It would literally take them about 15 minutes to go down to the end of the path and back, and that'd be it. I think Mike and I would like to have the easement removed because we're in the process of possibly downsizing, and we feel that this would take one hurdle off of our potentially selling our home. Yeah, I mean, I think that, a buyer might say, oh, really? What is this easement? And be concerned about it. And so since it goes nowhere, we feel like to remove it, that would be great. So I guess that's all we have to say.
Okay, thank you. So this was discussed at the Open Space Committee meeting last week. Because as with other properties that are under Chapter 61, where the town has right of first refusal, there's a process where open space plays a critical role in taking a look at the value of the properties, the value of easements, the values of trails. So Amy Moot is on tonight, and she's the chair of the Open Space Committee. So I would like, Amy, thank you for joining us tonight. And if you could just talk a little bit about the discussion at the Open Space Committee and its recommendation, we'd appreciate it.
Helps if I unmute, I think. Thanks, Carol. Yeah, I think there was a bit of a discussion about this particular easement, but mostly we talked about easements in general. And I think the general consensus was that trail easements are valuable, and that in order to consider extinguishing one, we should go through a process, a defined process that determines the value of the easement, the potential that it could ever be useful, and whether or not, why, first off, understanding why the planners put it there in the first place. I think you've explained that, in that there is a trail on the other property that it did connect to. And so we just felt like we would prefer that, we believed that at least until a process is somewhat defined and that process is executed, that planning shouldn't be releasing or extinguishing any of the easements that it currently holds. And that was where the committee came out. I think there was some knowledge of the other trail that runs between Pine and Walpole, and so I've been tasked to try and understand that a little bit better. I know it was an easement, a mutual landowner easement that was extinguished, created in 1914, I think, and extinguished in the 40s by the landowners. But I believe that it still exists. The trail still exists, and in fact was used quite extensively during, or at least to some extent, by the neighborhood during COVID. So I'm actually surprised to hear that you didn't have, not your neighborhood, the Pine Street neighborhood, I'm sorry, to access Noanette. So I'm surprised that you didn't have people from your neighborhood using it to get down to Noanette.
Yeah, if we could just interject. So my understanding was the trail that went across the corner of our property, and I think it's I don't know the house number on Walpole Street, but so we actually can just walk down our road. We walk down Village Hill Road, we get onto Walpole Street, and we can get into Noanette Woodlands very easily without having to walk through the woods.
Mhm.
And I think it would be, well, anyways, but I was just interested because my understanding is the trail that's connects to the one on our property had gone away.
I don't know. I haven't had the opportunity to walk it. The chair of the Concom is John Sullivan, who actually lives in that neighborhood and was the one who I had heard about the trail from. He's currently in France, so I'm waiting for him to come home so that I can do a little exploring with a neighbor and get some local knowledge, so to speak, because I live on the other side. I live over on Glen Street, so I know my trails, and I know some of the trails over by you, but not that one.
I guess would it
Okay,
be beneficial to have them come and take a look at our?
Well, I think as part of the Chapter 61 release process, which it may be a good model, it's really up to planning, Concom, Board of Selectmen, open safe space to define it. I'm not gonna say we should definitely follow that process, but that's a process. In that case, we almost always do a site walk on the property to understand the local conditions. And so that would certainly, I would recommend that
so, yeah,
be part of the process.
So, Beth, it's a good question, and based on the conversation we had on open space, and I'm the planning board liaison to open space as well, that Amy and I are working on developing a suggested process that we will then work through town government, if you will. It basically, as we've said, mirrors the Chapter 61 process. So the authority to extinguish an easement that has not been perfected through town meeting vote, which this one was not, which is why it was originally on the ballot for last year, to your point. Okay, that authority is with the planning board.
Mhm.
However, the process is such and should be such that due diligence is done by various other boards and committees that are involved with open space and trails and so forth. So we haven't had a chance, we are just now, basically because of your application, looking and saying we really don't have a process. It's relatively informal. We do need to formalize it as a town for good governance, and to make it clear for folks that have easements on their property. And we have to go through the process and have the time to do the necessary walkthrough and take a look at the larger picture, if you will, from 10,000 feet up, to look at connections and so forth.
Right.
So,
Because if you look-
all that has to be done before the planning board would vote on your application.
Right, because if you look at the easement that's an amendment that's attached to our deed, it actually shows that there's a bridle path on our street, on Village Hill Road and on Powder House Road as well. And so I question, does that mean that people can ride their horses along the front of our yards? Or does that mean that they can ride on the street? It's very unclear as to what the bridle path easement means, but it's marked on the document that we have, which I sent to you. It shows not only the easement down our driveway, but then also along Village Hill Road and on Powder House. And it's,
Yeah, it is.
Or this is one that goes nowhere down the steep hill. It doesn't seem to make any sense.
right,
Well, this is all more reasons for us to step back for a moment from a planning board standpoint, make sure we have the process and that all the boards and committees do their due diligence, report back to the planning board with their recommendations, and then the planning board would make a decision on this.
Excellent.
I mean, the other thing that it would be sort of concerning is like our dog's on an electric fence. It doesn't go all the way down to the bottom of the hill because the neighbors behind us used to have 2 large German Shepherds. And, if someone were walking down there, if there are dogs on electric fence too, that's very dangerous because those dogs could go right through those fences. So I guess, my concern too was as a homeowner with a dog, is there some liability there too if someone's walking on what feels to my dog as if it's my property? I wouldn't want the dog to bite someone.
Sure. Well, part of the issue is that in addition to us having to develop a formal procedure and doing the due diligence, you at least are aware that you have an easement on your property. There's some property owners that aren't even aware that there's an easement. Because the new process has to include a way of keeping owners aware
Right,
and making sure they understand, to your point, understanding their responsibilities
right,
and so forth. The easement is not town-owned land. The easement is your land.
no, I get
The
that,
town does not maintain an easement, as
Right.
far as keeping it clear and stuff. So they
No,
maintain
well,
it on
they-
the sense that it's in the books, and the landowner is not supposed to develop that land.
right.
Certainly,
Well,
there's-
some of the easements that are old, the easement has been subsumed into the landscaping plan, of the property owner.
It says we're not required to have any maintenance of it.
Right, it is actually, if the town wants to maintain it, then they have the right to do that. And that's the other thing that we need to get defined, in addition to just keeping people aware of the easements that are on their property. understanding who within the town is responsible for maintaining the trails should they want to be there. In a few cases, the easement has been given to the Conservation Commission, and the commission, when that easement became necessary because another trail that was over private land that had been used for 20 or 30 years, changed ownership, and the new owners didn't want people walking on the private trail. Then the Concom easement became necessary, and we worked with the homeowner to move their shrubs. They had done a little more than just landscape it, or their landscaping had covered over the bounds. So
Right.
it was pretty obvious that they had been aggressively landscaping it. So we helped them move some of their shrubs so that we wouldn't destroy property. But
Yes,
anyway,
yeah.
it doesn't sound like
So there-
your
there was-
easement
right. Yeah, there was no.
situation at all, but I'm just saying that,
Yeah.
in that case, for years,
Right.
the easement wasn't necessary, and then it became critical.
Yeah.
And
Thanks, Amy, which is why Dover tends to keep open space and keep easements, because one never knows. But that general philosophy aside for a moment, we have a specific request from you
Yes.
two. And we have a process that we need to define a little bit better and then implement in order to do due diligence, Beth and Mike, for your request.
Excellent.
So we have a couple possibilities. There are very often time constraints involved. We could put this on hold, or you could withdraw the application without prejudice, which means that the planning board hasn't made any decision at all on this. And then after we've done our due diligence and so forth, and take a walk with you and so forth, you can decide whether you want to resubmit the request again. But I'd like to open it up first to members of the planning board. I hope you all did receive the memo, and I apologize for coming in late today from Amy, but thank you, Amy, for getting that done over the weekend. And so I hope you got a chance to read the memo from Amy, which represents the views of the Open Space Committee from last Tuesday night's meeting. And I'll open it up to any other questions that you may have, planning board members. Jody.
Carol, how could we put some meat on the bone here when it comes to thinking about the development of that process? Because that could take, 3 weeks, 2 months, or a year and a half. How do we give Beth and Mike some direction on that?
We can only commit to the Benjamins that we will work as quickly as we can to get this through the system. And I know you've been here long enough to know that making a time commitment on that would be a little bit difficult, but hopefully, within the next two or 3 months, we would have this all resolved. We have to discuss it with the Conservation Commission. We have to write it up. We have to discuss it with the Conservation Commission. We probably have to go through the Board of Selectmen, or at least the town administrator, which may not be changing within the next 3 or 4 weeks. So you might have to bear with us a little bit, unless there's a huge time constraint that you would like to share with us.
There's not at the moment. Like I said, we're thinking about downsizing. This was just an item that we wanted to see if we couldn't address, to make it a little bit better packaged when we do get to that point.
Sure, totally understand that. And I appreciate you coming to us with it. So it's given us the impetus to address something that some of us have been talking about for quite some time. So for that, we thank you.
All right. And I just also want to note that my new neighbors they're on Pine Street, so they're behind me, down the hill behind me. They just bought their house in, I guess, September. They had no mention that there was an easement along the back line of their property that was on our property. It's pretty much woods between the two of us. So in effect, somebody could walk through there and they would not know that the easement was on our property. I would suggest that when abutters are changing hands in terms of new owners, they should be alerted that there's a potential pathway that's going to be right on the edge of their property.
Is,
No,
is
you
that,
bring up a very valid point, because as we were looking at the easements last year,
Yes.
for town meeting,
Yes.
it was amazing how many property owners, forget whether you were a butter, it's amazing how many property owners didn't realize that they had an easement on their property, despite the fact that they had mortgages,
Mhm.
attorneys, and so forth, as they were closing on property over the years. So,
so just to be clear though, is it not a question of it not being on the deed, or is it just an oversight by residents council that the issue was not, it's got to be listed on the deed. Am I not correct?
yes, Bill, it's the latter. It is very much on the deed. And all the work that was done by the planning board intern in 2021, early 2022, in preparation for the town meeting article last year,
Yeah.
had to do with going into the registry and looking at the deeds. So,
But to
yeah,
that point, and a butter wouldn't
When-
have
when-
anything.
and the
excuse me.
butter would not know, a butter would
Yeah.
not know, to Beth's
Right.
point, but the property owner would.
But so Beth, when you bought the property, however many years ago, did you know at the time, I mean, realtors are obligated to
Yes.
let you did you know this?
Yes,
You-
yes, but our neighbor to the right of us had planted yew bushes all the way down between our house and theirs.
Yeah.
Barrier, and when you look down the hill, it looked highly similar to the picture that I sent, and from the end of our driveway down the hill, it was trees that had grown up, and
Yeah. Yeah,
I couldn't imagine that there would be a path anywhere.
Well, no, but that's why you hire a good lawyer and you do your research. Yeah. Yeah.
About it.
Right.
And I looked at it and said, wow, no one's ever gonna walk down this, and didn't worry about it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I had a question. I was just going through all the information, and my question was, there's a couple of maps that are very helpful. But I didn't see any map that identified where actually the easement was located. Did I miss that, or?
It's one of the, yeah, it should be in there. It should
I
be-
see two maps. I see
Laura,
this one.
Laura, could you pull
Yeah.
those up?
Yep.
Why don't we have Laura pull those up, Bill? Might
Thank
be
you.
easier, okay?
Yep.
That'd be helpful.
Let's see here.
Did we already show this? I know I was a few minutes late.
No, we didn't. Okay, I think let's see, this is the plan of the subdivision. It's called Taylor Estates.
Yep.
And I'm just kind of peering at this.
Sorry, I can't
Um,
see anything, Laura. I'm not sure if it's.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, I forgot to share my screen.
Yeah, I see that one. It's right here. And, but I don't see an easement, any sort of,
Just a dashed line along between our property and the next property to the right of us.
okay, let's see if we can bring it up.
Yeah.
Let me see if I
Excellent.
can,
Zoom in.
yeah, I'm trying to see how
Yeah.
I can
10
rotate
to 11.
this.
So we're lot number 10, and right.
Okay,
between
which is
10
over
and
here.
11, right between 10 and 11, there's the dash line, right?
There it
Little
is.
thing right
See that?
here.
It's very subtle.
Yeah.
Okay,
But then if you also look along the road itself, that dash line is all the way around the road. It's a bridle path. You can see it's listed in front of 14 and 15, right on the,
Mhm.
bridle
Yeah,
path,
let's
bridle
see.
path, right in
14,
front.
15.
And so again,
Here we go.
is that on our front lawns, or is that on the road?
That was my next question is, how is there a bridle path on the actual asphalt?
Right,
Well,
Well, that looks, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that looks like the asphalt, but that's really the road layout. So very often someone's property won't go directly to the asphalt. It'll stop at some point before the asphalt. So in that space, that's where that bridle path would be located. And whoever was saying, would it be right in front of the property? Yeah, that's what that's showing.
So the way our road currently is, and I can take more pictures, is the curb comes right to the edge of our grass. Yeah, so if the bridle path is there, then they're gonna ride along our path or along our grass, I guess.
Well, so so a map like this is not a survey map, right?
Right.
So one of the issues that we have on very many issues in Dover is the right of way
Yep,
of the town for the road, okay? So we would have to go into, again, that would be part of our due diligence and process, to go into the actually surveyed maps to understand whether we're talking about an extension that's on road or on grass, or whether it extends into people's properties and exactly where and so forth.
mhm,
You cannot determine that from a map like this.
right.
So Beth, you're saying that this bridle path that is on your left-hand border of your property essentially dead ends at
That-
some point?
My belief is it dead ends at that back corner of our property, because when I saw the maps that were put together for town meeting last year, the connecting path was not there.
Hmm.
And I asked, I think it's Courtney, is that?
Yes.
Yeah, I asked Courtney about it. I had an email back and forth with her because I said, it looks like this path just ends at the end of our property. She said, yes, that's correct.
Hmm.
There is no continuation.
Well, we
So
would
Beth,
want to confirm that for sure.
Beth, if you still have those emails between you and Courtney, would it be possible for you to send them to Laura?
Yeah, I'll try and find them.
If you can find them, great, that appreciate it. We've had trouble recovering some of that from the town system.
Yeah.
So help us with the background.
Yeah, because obviously behind your property is that large parcel of land that ultimately runs, and then it runs out to Pine Street.
But that would be my question is what is this connecting? I mean, it's not, there's other easements that are obvious. This isn't too far from where I live, that are obvious, and they cross Walpole straight into, well, clip someone's property and then head into Noanet. I
Yeah.
don't see how this does that.
Can you
Well,
see-
that's exactly why we want to have the Open Space Committee look into this a little bit more.
Right.
Not only with their research through the paper trail and maps and so forth, but also with their feet. And we will be able to give better answers to all those questions because they're all excellent ones.
So I
Won't
pulled,
have any answers tonight, certainly on this.
that's okay. I pulled this off of the town website. It's another map that shows the property. So mine's the yellow one. And then this big piece over here, if you can see that, it kind of comes out like a pork chop. That driveway that's right there is Walpole Street.
So Laura, do we have a time constraint on acting on this application?
No, not that I'm
Oh,
aware
there
of.
you go. That's a
Oh,
good
there
one.
we go. Okay. Right,
Can you just pull up a little bit so we
Okay,
can see
sorry.
it?
Yeah.
there you go.
Okay, so here's the Benjamin's property that's outlined in yellow, and this property, I believe, is owned by some people with the last name of Little,
Okay, yep.
or used to be,
Yep.
and it goes
That's number
through to,
33, I think.
yeah, from Walpole, it goes all the way to Pine Street. And right back here is where that easement ends.
Yep.
So it does look pretty wooded on this larger property that it runs into.
So it's
On the other
literally
hand-
stopping at the back corner of the Benjamins. I mean, the easement doesn't cross over 12001. Is that what we're saying?
So apparently when it was first developed, there were horse trails. And they went from somewhere on 12001 up through, because our whole neighborhood was farmland and there
Right.
were horse trails through there. And so that's why they allowed the bridle easements.
Okay.
But I don't believe that the one that comes to the back point of ours connects through to the other trails anymore.
Well, that's the
that-
$1 million question.
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah.
Because
That's right. So I-
12001 is private property with no easement on
Yeah.
it, and the path goes down to the back of Beth's property and stops. That's a far different equation, yeah.
Right, so these are all the questions that we need to get answered with a little bit more work. Amy, I'll let you briefly respond.
So I just wanted to mention that while it's called a bridle trail, it is not just for the horses, although I love to ride, so
Yeah.
I use many of them, but it's also just a walking trail. And so when the roads were first put in, they're private roads. They're not necessarily public roads until the town accepts them. So to some extent, having the bridle easement on the roads meant that townspeople could walk on the roads.
Yeah.
Now it's, a moot point, so to speak. But anyway, I just want to point out it's not always horses. It is also the trail network for people who want to walk.
Yeah, it's clearly stated in our easement that it's for hikers and for cross-country skiers and the likes. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted people not to focus on necessarily figuring out where the horses could go.
I just want to come back to Carol's statement earlier about whether we should withdraw this until the town figures out the process. Is that the best thing for us to do at this point?
Well, it's why I asked, it's a good question, Beth, and it's why I asked Laura. Some of our applications and processes have certain time limits for the planning board to act, and if we don't act, then it assumes acceptance, for instance, on other types of applications. So I just wanted to check with our town planner to make sure that we don't have that situation here, and it appears that we don't. So it would be fine for you to keep for us, if it's okay with you, to keep the application, understanding that it's going to take us a bit to work through the process and all.
Okay.
And we will do our best to do it as quickly as we can. And at the same time, if anything changes from your timeline and so forth, please let us know. And we'll see if we can work together to get this resolved as quickly as we can.
Yeah. And again, we'd be happy to walk down through wherever with whoever'd like to come.
Great.
Pretty steep hill.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Laura and Carol, do you happen to know if there's been a review of the minutes from when this development was created to see if there was a discussion about the easements?
That has not occurred yet either.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All that will be part of the research. Recognizing for those of us that have been there for a while, it was farmland. So you would expect that the planning board would have at the time put in a whole bunch of trail easements, just given the nature of what it was before development.
Well, not that anybody cares a hoot, but when I was about 13 years old, I did catch a 5-pound largemouth bass in that pond, for what it's
Wow.
worth.
Wow.
I do
For what it's
remember
worth,
that.
Bill, for what it's worth, I care, Bill.
Is it
That's
stuffed
all.
over the fireplace?
You made my night. You made my night. Thank you.
I'm gonna have to get to know you, the littles, that sounds like.
Unfortunately, it's not over my fireplace.
Bill, how did you get there? Did you get there by foot?
Well, Laura was right. It was owned by the Littles, and they were family friends. And I used to go there. They were friends of ours, and they used to go down there and they stocked it with these fish, and it was just loaded with fish. And you guys may have heard about this house. Beth, you probably know that house burnt down about 10 years ago. It was a
That
beautiful.
quite scary.
Yeah, it was terrible, but I think they rebuilt it almost to the exact specifications, is what I was told, but it was a terrible fire.
Wow.
Wow. Okay, well, this has been a good discussion, and we all now know what we need to do. And we'll try to do it with as much speed and due diligence as we can. So Beth and Mike, if you'll bear with us for a little bit. And we'll keep you informed of our progress. I have no doubt that there'll be some walks involved. And we look forward to doing that as soon as we can.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we need to leave.
Okay, have a good evening.
You too. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Okay. So another, peel the onion and find something else to work on, so.
Well, it feels like we can come up with a framework, that.
It's not hard, the
gives
framework
us
already
like
there.
a specific process to walk through, and then we have to make some judgments. I mean, this doesn't feel like a scenario where there's going to be a one size fits all answer based on, a number score.
Exactly, and that's exactly why we have to have the process so that we
Yeah.
do the due diligence for each one. It took me maybe a half hour after the open space committee meeting the other night just to draft up one for this one that Amy and I are now discussing. And once we sort of fine tune it a little bit, we'll just put it before the Conservation Commission and decide. It brings up the issues that we never got to phase 2 of the easement issue last year. We got to the article that was going to make sure that all the easements that had not been perfected, meaning that they had not been accepted town meeting, got accepted, perfected to town meeting. But phase 2 of that, which we never got to because we drew the article, was okay, well, now we have these easements.
Now
What do we do next? Right. So there's really one organization in Dover that has any capability, and certainly not enough, but any capability to monitor, maintain, keep track of open space and easements, and it's really the Conservation Commission. So it would be a logical choice to, once these are perfected, because they'd have to be perfected as well, the remaining ones to go to town meeting, and then transfer them over to the responsibility of the Conservation Commission. But again, this is the process that we have to work through.
So there is, just as an aside, and then I know we have to move on, but right now, if the town holds an easement on a property, or I guess it's it's really on a property,
On a property.
who is responsible for the maintenance or the care of that easement?
No one. Right? Unless it's deemed necessary, in which case we do what we did over on
Right, so there are a handful that are specifically call out the owner being the Conservation Commission. And in that case, the Concom is responsible for the easement and can make the decision to maintain it or not, or if some citizens want to maintain it, for example, the Hunt Club, then they can do that as well. And so the easement on Ben Arthur is the one I was referring to, and we provided some funds, and there was some sweat equity put in by the neighborhood because they wanted to use it. And there's another one that it belongs to the Concom that's on Snows Hill, and the Hunt Club maintains that for us essentially by default.
but all the ones
If
that
we
were-
farm out the maintenance to somebody that is not a town entity?
We're not. Yes, yeah, we can have a trail committee. We do have a trail committee in open space, and we do in Concom now also, and it has citizens on it.
Got it.
That's how all the trails on the public lands in Dover are currently maintained. The Concom does not spend any taxpayer money maintaining trails. When there's a big maintenance issue like a new bog bridge, or an improvement like putting in a bog bridge where one doesn't exist, we pay for some of that or pay for it. But to a large extent, Dover has benefited from people chipping in and doing the work because they want to use the land.
It's the irony of the history and the budget, because open space and trails is such an incredibly important part of what Dover is and what folks value so
Right.
much, except that it's not specifically staffed or funded. So, Amy, thank you so much for attending. Really appreciate it.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
clarifying. We'll be in touch and get that finalized and talk about the schedule, but for Concom. See if we can help the Benjamins out, at least to close the issue one way or the other.
Can I stay on and listen to Val's report on the tree? climb?
Sure, absolutely. Of course we can. What a wonderful
Thank you.
segue. Thank you very much. So we will now move to agenda item number 2, which is a summary of the tree preservation work that has been done by the consultants and the committee. So I'm going to turn this over to Val.
Yes, thank you.
Val,
So,
do you want me to, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to jump in too fast. Do you want me to bring up on my screen that table with all the
Yes, that would
all
be
your
great.
ideas
Thank
on it?
you.
Okay.
Thank you. So we have finished our work with the Conway School. We started working with them in early January, and they provided the summary recommendations in a really nice document. They did a lot of work. They provided that near the end of April. And so I believe Laura sent that out to everyone, and I know it's lengthy. But I think if we want to focus just for the sake of time tonight, starting on page 94 where they have the recommendations. And Laura sent out a document earlier today where I tried to just quickly do a 1-pager summary of the recommendations, looking at the timeline that they provided us with. So the timeline that they were using was based on, given kind of the different initiatives that are happening in Dover, what makes sense from a prioritizing standpoint for an early succession, a mid succession, and then a late succession. And they kind of use that as a metaphor for how forests grow back. So when you have a forest burn down, you have that early succession, which are kind of like those opportunistic trees that grow quickly and take advantage of the conditions. And then you move into a little bit more of a mature forest and whatnot. So, so one of the first things, and Laura's going to bring that up, but one of the first things that they talk about in the recommendation section is the fact that there is a stormwater bylaw review happening in the Department of Public Works. And so,
There we go.
okay.
Okay.
So, so just to kind of orient everyone to this summary, on the left-hand side is kind of where that timeline is. You can see early succession. So the early succession is the light blue. So these are all the recommendations that they are suggesting in the light blue area. And so right at the top, you'll see the large, it'll say large lot impact, small lot impact, municipal public impact, and education impact. So I look at, those are my categories, and I look at these recommendations based on, are they going to be impacting lots that are, or parcels of property that are generally 3 acres or larger? Will they be impacting parcels that tend to be smaller than 3 acres? Are the recommendations primarily impacting municipal and public lands? Or is it a recommendation that's focusing largely on educating our community? And so, and there's overlap in these different areas. So for example, the stormwater bylaw, that has the potential to impact the large lots, small lots, and municipal lots. And as I was just mentioning, in the Department of Public Works, Kevin McCabe is working with a consultant to review Dover's current stormwater bylaws and make sure that they are up to date with all of the state recommendations. And Carol, if I miss anything, please jump in, because I know you and Kevin have had some conversations as well. So so the stormwater bylaw update is a recommendation in the early succession because that is simultaneously going on in the highway department. So it makes sense that we sit with Kevin and talk about where we could pull in some tree preservation opportunities with the stormwater and the runoff pieces. So some of those could be something like looking at tree preservation in the perimeter of a lot to prevent runoff going into abutters. It could mean looking at certain size trees and trying to retain those types of trees on lots during construction so that when you have rains, you know, the canopy of the tree kind of kind of disseminates and dissipates the water runoff. And so it reduces the potential for erosion. So there's different things that we can look at along with Kevin that might make sense to add into the stormwater bylaws. And then just below that, it states build a robust online tree resource library. That would be, run by the committee, but provided as an education source for our community. And just today, I received something from Rhode Island Energy that talked about determining which trees make the most sense for planting on your yard based on their location. And they gave a really nice document that shows every type of tree, how tall it gets, and which ones you would not want to plant underneath electric lines because it's going to interfere in the electric line, versus which ones tend to get taller and you can plant those somewhere on your property that would not create a risk to your home or to the electric lines. So that's an example of a resource. Another one might be different pests and infestations that are happening with trees in the area. So a variety of different things that came up in our public forum that could go on that online resource. The second one is collaborate with school programs and students. So basically what they're saying here is continue doing what we've already begun when we brought Angela Lynn onto our committee, continue working with high school and middle school students and the different programs like the sustainability task force that's at the high school. Public planting projects is, again, an opportunity to work with the public to identify places to plant our trees, mostly on municipal lots, of course, but getting different groups, maybe it's the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, things like that involved in these planting projects. Maybe it's a garden club, things like that to really engage our community and continue educating and bring about awareness. And then going back to the left-hand side under the large lot, develop and adopt a natural resource protection zoning bylaw. So that was attempted back in 2017. And certainly something, when we're talking about Hale and the large lot at Hale, if that shouldn't move forward as a conservation restriction, maybe this is something that we want to think about for protecting the large forested area at Hale. Or maybe it's something we want to think about as we're looking at MBTA communities. And we know that we have at least 7 acres in Dover that we are supposed to be identifying for the MBTA zoning. Maybe this is something we'd also like to adopt as a way of preserving trees with that new zoning, whether it's an overlay or whatever it is that we decide to do. And then moving a little bit to the right under the municipal public impact, you have the hail protection. And again, if the community determines not to move forward with the CR, how can we find ways to protect the forested areas, because it is such an ecological gem in that area of our community. Sending out community surveys, just to gauge the public interest and what their concerns or what their suggestions for prioritizing might be. The Chapter 87 is the public shade tree bylaw. We have one that is brought forward by the state, but we could also enhance that to be more specific just for Dover. We could build upon what the state has already begun. A tree fund, which kind of goes hand in hand with the stormwater bylaws. Whereas if the planning board decides to put forward any type of tree preservation bylaws, oftentimes that is coupled with a tree fund, so that for developments, if they are not able to preserve specific trees. So let's say it's a tree that is over 10 inches in diameter, and that's considered a protected tree. Then what they could do instead of either retaining it or replanting on their lot, they could put money toward this tree fund, and then the town would decide where to plant trees on municipal properties. So it's a pretty common practice in communities around us that have tree preservation bylaws. And then tree inventory, I've spoken with Kevin McCabe. He is very interested in tree inventory. He couldn't do it this year He's not sure he could do it next year just because of the prioritization that he has with the highway department, but he said it's definitely something that they're interested in, and we could determine with them where to start the tree inventory, because there are so many trees in Dover. We're very fortunate for that. Maybe starting in the center of the town, if we feel, you know, with our village project initiative that we're looking at, if we feel that that would be a good starting point, and inventory all the trees in the center of town. And that helps the town understand what trees are where, what types of trees they are, and if they are at risk, or when you want to, if you need to remove one because it's a hazard, what type of tree you can replace it with. Become a Tree City USA designation. That is something I think Dover could do quite quickly. We are already meeting several of the requirements for that. So again, that would be something that that our tree committee could move forward with. And then the Community Forest Commission, that recommendation is basically to have a new committee, because this tree committee, the Tree Preservation Committee, is a 2-year committee. So after 2 years, you know, our time is up. And so their recommendation is they would encourage us to create or kind of transition our Tree Preservation Committee into a Community Forest Commission and work very closely with the tree warden and support the initiatives of the tree warden and support the initiatives that are recommended within this this summary. So those are kind of the quick hit ones. And I think for the question for the planning board is, where do we want to prioritize our efforts? So we have mid-succession ones. We can, you know, decide if we want to pick a couple out of the early succession, or if there's maybe one that we just want to go all in on and really push forward. And then some mid-succession ones, you know, again, working, a lot of these are going to be working with other committees, boards, or commissions in town to put forward either some bylaws or some regulations. So developing a low impact and green infrastructure regulations tends to be also with the stormwater bylaws, also with subdivisions and putting in bioswales and different ways of using the natural resources to mitigate erosion and runoff, and to keep the waters clean without having so much of it going into our perennial streams and then into the Charles River. So ways of keeping it here using natural resources. A forest resource overlay, again, that would be something we could look at for Hale if it ends up not going forward as a conservation, as a conservation restriction. Then we could do a forest overlay where in certain areas the trees are protected, and so maybe in those particular areas there are stronger bylaws than there may be in other areas, because we feel that the trees in certain areas within Dover have a very valuable function that is beneficial to our community. And then a general tree preservation bylaw, again, should we not be able to put tree preservation items into the stormwater updates, then we could look at just a general tree preservation bylaw by itself as a standalone bylaw. And that could affect large lots, small lots, and also municipal lots. So even as we're looking at the Carroll Community Center and the impact on trees as we are developing that community center. So, and then to kind of wrap up the midsections, you have the updating master plan for climate resiliency, potentially creating a community forest and climate resiliency plan. Those are similar. The master plan, though, looks beyond the climate resiliency, whereas the community forest and climate resiliency plan is really a focus, almost like as a hazard mitigation plan. It would complement that. A tree canopy assessment. So that is looking, it's kind of similar to the tree inventory, but it's really looking at the canopy itself rather than individual trees. It's saying, okay, over here you have a really mature forest and your tree canopy is, 80% of this particular land area. Over here you have a new subdivision and your tree canopy is maybe 25% of your land coverage. So it looks over time at how your tree canopy is changing in your community and helping you decide where you need to focus any tree planting efforts. And then there's a program that other communities have used called the Free Setback Program. And what they do there is the community, the municipality offers trees to folks along right-of-ways to plant the trees. And then those landowners would maintain those trees, but it's an opportunity to increase the tree coverage along roadways, but still allow for the property owners to have the benefits of those trees, whether it's providing some shade for their home or providing just some property value in general for them. So it's a public-private opportunity. And then forming a community nonprofit. So that recommendation is looking at, one piece is we have a community forest commission. Another piece might be we have a Friends of the Dover Trees group that in a non-for-profit mechanism are able to do some public education and public engagement items, either in concert or separately from the municipality. And then lastly here, incorporating tree education into curriculums and community programs. So in the short term, when they talked about continuing to engage students in the schools, this one also is part of that, but looks also like at park and rec programs or like Poesit farm programs, maybe Lookout Farms, and really partnering with different organizations in the area to continue offering tree education opportunities. Maybe it's talks at the library or something along those lines, supporting different garden clubs in the talks that they're giving. So just kind of some opportunities to work together with community programs. And then the late succession items, these are things that likely would take 2 to 3 years because it would require a little bit more time-intensive work to get these pieces put together, but regulating land clearing as part of a construction permitting process. So involving the building department, again, the Board of Health, the Highway Department in determining what is reasonable and unreasonable land clearing when there's large development projects going on, or even small development projects on single lots. Trench permit process, other communities have used this along the roadways and the right-of-ways to protect the trees that are within the right-of-way. So what they have, some of the regulations around this is, any work done on a property that is within 50 feet of a public shade tree, there will be, certain ways of safeguarding the root systems to protect those trees so that, 5 years or 10 years down the road, you're not dealing with dead trees because the roots were cut away. And then increasing wetland buffer protection, something, that's more of a conservation commission item, but they were putting that forward as another way of tree preservation for the municipality as a whole. And then the full-time tree warden. Right now, Dover has a part-time tree warden, which isn't unusual for many of the communities, but determining on, where the planning board would like to go with different bylaws or, the stormwater updates, you may want to think about having a full-time tree warden for the enforcement piece, because that tends to be where a lot of communities see their bylaws start to fall short, is they can put together some really great bylaws, but when it comes to enforcement, that's where things kind of start to fall apart. So for example, some communities will have a bylaw that says if you cut a particular type, like say an oak tree, a 6-inch oak tree in the perimeter of your property, then you need to replace it with six inches worth of oak trees. So of course they're going to be smaller. Maybe it's 2-3 inch oak trees. And so that's where things start to kind of fall apart, because oftentimes in some communities that 6-inch oak tree gets cut and it gets replaced with a arborvitae that dies within 2 years. So, so they said the enforcement piece is really where you have to put some thought into to make sure that whatever bylaws you put forward will stick and be worth the time and effort that you put into developing them. So that's a summary of some of the things that we worked on with the Conway School. And I'm certainly interested in people's thoughts, interested in questions, where you feel, efforts would be best focused moving forward.
Val, this has been great. Thank you. But might I just say one thing before the discussion opens up? Because clearly, this is just this spreadsheet alone, as Val mentioned, probably involves almost every department and many boards and committees in town. So, why is the planning board spearheading this at this point? Because we knew from citizen comments and stuff that there was an aspect of our zoning bylaws that did impact trees and did impact citizens. And of course, Conway School has just done such a comprehensive job that they're looking at the whole. At the same time, nature abhors a vacuum. And there's no one else in town looking at this. So Val, I commend you and the committee for all this work, and clearly the Conway School has done a wonderful job too. I think as we proceed, one thing for all of us to consider is what are the priorities for the planning board as an entity? And what are priorities that might expand out into the community and town government in a larger sense, and how we work all that together. So I just wanted to preface that. So let's open it up, because Val, this was great.
I'll chime in. I thought it was, thanks a lot to Val. I thought it was an extremely, as Carol used the right word there, I think, a comprehensive report. Certainly, I read all of it. So took a chunk of my afternoon here, but it was very. That was good. Slight on the wish list of things to see of an 180-page document. The executive summary, if it had some of these conclusions in there, would be great. I'm really happy to put these together, because I don't think there's any recommendations in the executive summary. So that might be.
That's great. Thank you. That's great feedback.
Yeah, even at just a super high level,
Yep.
And then my. Again, Carol kind of, I think, actually summarized my point, which there's a heck of a lot on here. And I look at this, maybe you tell me how you view it, as a wish list of sort of all the things that would be nice to get done. And that's kind of maybe the priority list that would be good to see, is sort of a nice to have and a must have kind of a thing. And, as in the past, we've had to really kind of get really focused on what we want to get done when it comes to bringing articles or whatever. And I think, it would be helpful to do that here as well. And maybe remember a little bit of the genesis of this in the first place, which for me seems to be, and again, Carol alluded to it, but I hear a lot from citizens in town talking about lots being cleared during construction. There's yet another within the last couple of weeks on Walpole, I've heard from friends on. So for me, and I understand that would be one that would probably be the heaviest lift here, but I think that for me would be the one that we would really need to focus in on. And something that I took out of the report that I thought was helpful is the way they highlighted other towns and specifically what they're doing about it. Northborough, Mashpee, Lexington, Weston. The I think approach to me, at least at a very high level, that maybe makes the most sense would be the construction approach. I think that we would have the greatest ability to sort of be successful with that, address citizens' concerns, and at the same time have the least amount of pushback, versus, let's say, if you cut a tree that's 6 inches on your property, you now have to replace it. I think that would be met with quite a bit of pushback. So just my 2 cents there. And I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks.
That's great feedback. Thank you so much, George. One of the actually not one, a few of the comments that we received was, please don't create bylaws that are going to prevent me from doing tree maintenance on my own property. So to George's point, I think that's part of the reason why a lot of other communities have looked at having a trigger be a large construction. So, and I think many of them determine large construction as, you know, increasing the size of their home by 50% or more, or like a tear down where the lot is being substantially impacted by either a complete rebuild or a large addition to their home.
Oh, go ahead,
Yeah,
Jody.
Julie.
Just a question, Val, and you probably know the answer because I think you know a lot. When a builder purchases a lot in Dover, is the typical process for the clearing that we've heard so much about to occur at the preliminary stage before? I mean, it doesn't.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not, where would we catch them? That's my question. Like if we were looking to anticipate a clearing, would the bylaw state something like obviously a lot more complex than this, you know, on a lot the size of blah, blah, whatever the trigger is, you have to talk to the building department or
I
something?
think you create a
Yes.
permit requirement, right? Like that's the mechanism. And
Right.
if,
So it would be,
Yeah.
yeah, it's my understanding that other communities have used it as part of the building permit. So no clearing to the lot until, say, you know, a tree plan has been provided where they are going to show that, you know, if you're talking about retaining the trees along the perimeter of the property, that, and, you know, we can talk about what makes sense for a construction area, right? But whatever the bylaw is that is determined. So, you know, no trees removed on the property until a plan has been shown how those trees will be preserved, whether it's in, you know, a setback around the perimeter or however
Right,
the
okay.
bylaw is termed.
Whatever the details were, got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Val, I just want to echo what George said. Congratulations. Like this was clearly an incredibly heavy lift, and we all owe you a debt of gratitude for taking it on. And
I have to say, the Conway School was a great group to work with. And
Sure,
Laura,
but-
thank you so much for all of your help.
you spearheaded it, you drove this, and we all thank you for doing it. This is incredible. So look, I think we're probably all in agreement that like the adoption of any of these items would be an improvement from the status quo. I agree with George. I feels like the most appropriate involvement, like from a planning board standpoint, is in the construction process. For what it's worth, I have a couple friends and neighbors who there was an abutting property where they had an extra large parcel. They took down probably 30, 40, 50 trees and left stumps for like 3 years, and then ripped up the stumps and have been building a house for like the last 2 years. And I know that our friends who abut the property have not been happy, like for a bunch of reasons. But it feels like at a minimum, like having some sort of oversight of that kind of behavior, activity is appropriate. Like, I don't know that every single one of those trees necessarily needed to come down. For example, like they have a backyard that they cleared as well, or they could have, in my view, should have left a few of those trees. So like, to me, that's what stands out as you know, the potentially the most like high value, high ROI opportunity here. That said, like, you are the one who's the most intimately familiar with all this. Like, I would defer to you to give us like a subset of recommended actions that maybe we can like deliberate at greater length. I mean, there's so much here, which is a testament to you and the Conway School, but like, if there are things that stand out to you as like, you know, what's going to be the most worthwhile, I would be very interested in hearing that from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think just kind of off the top of my head, as we have been talking with different residents and hearing some of the stories, whether it's in public forums or in different boards and commissions, as people have voiced their concerns, I think trying to build in some protections in the stormwater bylaw would be really a great thing. And I think it would be a great step in the direction where we need to go. Specifically, if we could focus on some protections around the perimeter of a lot, because that tends to be where people start to really feel that construction next door, right? Whether it's your loss of privacy, whether it's the erosion of the, we all know when there's construction going on, there's these large dirt hills usually. And a lot of that, if you get heavy rains, runs onto the abutter's property next door. I've heard of stories of basements flooding because of water running onto the property. So I feel that, or people not quite knowing where the property lines are. And, a subcontractor, a tree removal service comes in and they just start cutting. And the next thing you know, they're cutting trees on the abutter's property that, I think could be avoided if we focused a little bit more in these perimeter areas about really preserving them. Oh, Jody, go ahead.
A question on that, Val. I think I just heard you say, but I'm sorry if I'm wrong, that that would be something we could bake into the stormwater bylaw update. Is that what you're saying?
I think that we can, that's the conversation I'm hoping to have with Kevin
Okay.
to see what we can do with that. Mhm.
And my other question is, when you say with Kevin, the Department of Public Works can bring a bylaw update like this one, correct? It wouldn't be a planning board bylaw update?
If it's a stormwater bylaw update to meet I think it's the MS4 requirements that the state puts on for stormwater management. It's sort of like floodplains, they're very specific requirements and so forth. Then it would be a DPW sponsored bylaw because they're responsible for stormwater management.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I think, sorry. I think one of the things that happened when Kevin brought his first cut at a stormwater bylaw to the town departments was that it was pretty clear that the planning board or the planner were going to have to administer it because the DPW doesn't really have anything to do with the construction process and, where permits need to be issued and so on.
Mhm.
So I think you have an opening to work with Kevin and show that you can assist him with making sure that, the stormwater gets managed properly.
Sorry, but are you suggesting that that would become a planning board review process for a developer or an owner?
Laura,
Well,
Laura,
someone, yeah,
may I? May I?
sure, please.
Okay, because I know we there's a nuance, that we have a difference in the nuance of all this.
Sure.
Very specific to your question, Jody, no. I do not view the planning board as having responsibility to determine whether something meets some construction. We've talked about this during site plan review, right?
Right.
So the town engineer, who does have the professional expertise on stormwater management, reports into Kevin McCabe, the director of the DPW.
Okay.
So I could see something, let's use what's coming up at the end of the month, 78 Strawberry Hill. That construction project for a new house and a pool and a tennis court and
Yep.
changing, right? So one of the big issues, because it's up on a hill and they clear cut the property and everything else, was stormwater management. We're not equipped to say, yeah, that looks like a good stormwater management plan to us.
Right.
We would expect something, just like we would expect something from the Board of Health that says, yes, the septic system can fit in here and meet the requirements for, setbacks from houses and the wellhead and everything else. We
Or you might
expect,
say a better corollary might be the building inspector, right? Because the Board of Health is a town board. Whereas we're talking about a town employee reviewing a technical plan.
well, the Board of Health has a town employee who's their Board of Health agent, so.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Well, yeah, whatever, but the concept's the same, right? In that
Okay.
we would get and we've asked Laura to work with the town engineer on this for 78 Strawberry Hill, which is, you tell us whether the plan that's been submitted for site plan review to the planning board meets the requirements of stormwater management.
Okay, got it.
And if you say yes, then we will go ahead and look at the other aspects of site plan review. If you say no, then we're not going to approve the site plan review and they have to go back to the drawing board. So, that's to the extent that the stormwater management bylaw can be expanded in its focus to include the more subjective aspects of stormwater management, the things that Val was talking about with the tree canopies and the perimeter work and all that kind of stuff. That's something that Val and the committee can work with Kevin to try to expand from the traditional engineering aspect of stormwater management so that the bylaw becomes a little bit broader.
And Brookline is a really great example that has used their stormwater management bylaw to enforce tree preservation initiatives. So, and in fact, the tree warden in Brookline is really well-known and respected throughout the state and has been involved with DCR at the state level for providing some guidance on how to structure the stormwater bylaw for tree preservation specifically. So, and I had the opportunity to talk with him with the Conway School to get some information about how they've gone about doing that, how they've enforced it. And their documents are all online, so we have access to all of those. So that's something that we certainly can sit down with Kevin and talk about. We're hoping the Tree Commission would like to have almost like a roundtable with you know, the Highway Department, the Board of Health, the Conservation Commission, sitting at the table, the building inspector, all sitting at the table together, talking through some of these to see how and what is the most efficient and effective way to implement them.
Yeah, can we go back just for a second to what I was trying to say? I think that the planner isn't going to be involved with analyzing the stormwater management, but someone has got to be interfacing with the applicants who are making proposals to the planning board. And I think that's where all of you get involved, whether you get a report from the town engineer saying, you know, this system is okay, this system is not okay. But I still see a role for the planning board in all this. I don't think it's all going to be worked out outside of your process. I think it's going to involve you.
Has there been to, Carol, maybe you've been around the longest, have we seen a site plan review where we talked about stormwater management and erosion control specifically as part of our site plan review? Like, and we factored that into our site plan review process?
Well, again, you know, 78 Strawberry Hill was an example recently. And then I believe that when we were approving the Haven Street Car Club, that stormwater management was discussed.
Oh, I thought that was more like,
And there were conditions, one of the, you know, some number of the 51
normally, like
conditions.
somebody
would go
goes to build a
involved.
pickleball court or a barn, and we don't talk about stormwater runoff.
No, but that kind of stuff is for those types of small things. So currently, that's all part of the building inspector's job.
Right, but if somebody buys a property and builds a new house, they don't come to us.
No, that's through the building inspector.
Right, exactly. So
Because there's no
we would be-
bylaw. Sorry, go ahead.
we would be essentially attempting to, or considering inserting the planning board into that process, for example, with a new build in Dover. We'd start seeing new builds, site plan review for new builds.
Well, not necessarily. You know, I think those kind of decisions get made down the way as we see exactly how all this gets put to paper. Because if a bylaw were passed, I'm going to use an extreme example. If a bylaw was passed that said there is no tree cutting on a lot that's being built upon within the 5-foot perimeter of the lot.
Yep.
Then that doesn't have to go to the planning board. That's something that's part of the building permit process.
Right.
Because
okay,
the
got
law
it.
already exists, so we won't have to
see what you
see it, right? So it really just depends how it all comes together.
Okay, well, anyway, interesting.
But I certainly agree that the last thing we need is more applications to come before us for things like that. I think that's
Well,
why.
never mind, let's thinking about, as we always do, sort of what is what are bylaw updates that we bring to town meeting and we can get past, right? Without the scenario arising where it appears that the planning board is trying to insert itself in all things Dover, where people want us to not be part of all things Dover. I'm just thinking out loud, about some of that.
Or on the other side of the coin, unfortunately, look at us as a saving grace for everything that's going on in Dover, and why don't we control it, right? Works both ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, those are all excellent comments. And so, again, the implementation and the enforcement has been the challenge for a lot of our neighboring communities. And so I anticipate that's where we're going to have to put significant time into making sure that we have a process clearly mapped out and so that there's
The other thing
minimal overlap.
that I've heard, Val, from other communities is that sometimes when these enforcement, usually fines, tend to be fairly nominal in the grand scheme of things from a developer's perspective. So it's sort of like cheaper for them to get fined.
Yes. Yes. We
so-
brought that, yep, sorry.
No, the other thing I just wanted to just throw out there, because I'm really interested in the natural resource protection zoning. But it sounds to me like maybe this isn't the consensus of the night and we're not there yet, but that the stormwater bylaw update might be sort of step one. And then depending upon what happens with hail, we might revisit natural resource protection zoning in the fall. Is that kind of what you're imagining, Val?
Yes, I definitely think that because of the timing with the highway department, we should look at what we can
Yeah.
work on for the stormwater bylaw updates. But I definitely think because of the MBTA communities zoning that we have to look at and the hail property coming up, that it makes sense for us to start thinking about the natural resource protection zoning. I think because should hail get voted down, I think that certainly is going to be something that we're going to be needing to consider sooner than later.
The other thing this brings up is, to me, Carol, is as we're thinking about the hiring of the irreplaceable Laura, these kinds of experiences, I know we don't necessarily, have a ton of applications, I know, but these are some pretty specific hiring objectives to be considering for sure. In terms of
Absolutely, and
skills and
absolutely.
experience.
And we'll talk about that a little bit later when I give some updates as well, but it's a good point. But I think the comments about stormwater, the work that Kevin is doing with the stormwater bylaw, there's a synergy there. I mean, might as well take advantage of
Right,
it,
exactly.
right? Yeah. So there seems to be a consensus that that's an obvious first thing to start working on. Since we've already started down the path a little bit with Kevin on that. Laura and I did have a meeting with Kevin and some other staff members and the consultants that he had hired. So Val, it might be a good thing for you to touch base and see where he is on that.
Yes, in fact, I'm hoping that tomorrow I can send him the report along with this one-page summary and then set up a time with him to just start walking through it so that he understands what the recommendations are and where some of these might have some overlap with him and what he's receptive to.
That would be great.
One of the things, Val, but I think the Tree City USA designation is really interesting too, from a low-hanging fruit perspective and some
Yes.
wins. Because as you said, if we're kind of already meeting some of the requirements, I don't know anything about that designation or what it does or gives us or makes
Yeah.
on, but it certainly would be on its face.
Right.
And I was
So
thinking-
the interesting thing is there are many communities around us who already have the Tree City USA designation,
Yeah.
and they have many less trees in their
Yeah.
community than what Dover does. So yeah, and some of it is, I think there's about 12,000 per year in the budget set aside for tree preservation efforts and and then having a tree warden, which we've met many of those already. And what it does is it potentially opens up Dover for more grant opportunities.
Mhm.
Once you are a Tree City USA designated community, you do become eligible for other tree grants. So
there any
tree
downside?
preservation grants.
Is there a downside to being a Tree City?
Just the fact that you need to continue maintaining those items that they require you to maintain that designation.
You
So,
can't.
so you need to have a tree committee as part of your municipal structure. So, yeah. So,
You're gonna get
So-
roped into running the tree committee for the rest of your life.
yeah, great.
Well, it's at some point, the tree committee that the town meeting eliminated a week and a half ago. They could recreate with a different charge to
Yeah,
have a tree
right.
committee for, right, exactly, yeah. Yeah. Anything else? I know this is such a wide topic, but unless there are any other comments, Val, my sense is that we're talking about a short-term focus on the stormwater bylaw and the synergies there. And up the Tree City USA, and then have the committee work on taking a look at these wonderful descriptions that you've got here and sort of prioritizing a little bit better. Thinking also a little bit politically as to what makes sense to start working with, town meeting on first type thing.
Right.
Is that about a summary that everybody has as well? Anything else to add to that? Thumbs up from Scott. Okay. Just one thing about the natural resource protection zoning.
Mhm.
So, and Hale. We'll be seeing hopefully sometime this month, the draft conservation restriction for Hale. I'm actually attending, Hale is having these informational sessions in the morning. They're open to the public. I'm attending one on Wednesday morning, up at Hale, to see what they have to say. But it may be something that we want to look at sooner rather than later, because the cynic in me says that if Hale is really doing their job and being managed correctly, then they need to plan for defeat, just like we would be planning for defeat. So it's unclear, and I guess we don't know. And Amy, if you have anything to opine on this, I'd appreciate it, since you're involved more than I. But it's very possible that Hale has something in their back pocket already with the developer. So that if we wait till after a fall town meeting, and if the CR does not get approved at the fall town meeting, and then we start thinking about a natural resource protection zoning bylaw, it may be too late. Because Hale might have something ready to go.
Well, wouldn't it be
knows?
too late either way, because we can't get a bylaw like that through until town meeting at the earliest?
Well, we could, if we could get it, the bylaw written, we could discuss with the selectmen, possibly having an article at the same town meeting. So if Article 1, which was the $10 million, right, see what I'm saying? Right,
Carol.
so.
You're thinking
Carol-
ahead. That's
Carol,
multi.
Carol, you don't need to be so cynical. Hale doesn't need the money yesterday. They need the money for the future. So they do not have any current plan to sell to
good to
a
hear.
developer. They have in the past, as part of, I don't know whether it was part of this, I think it was probably, well, it was part of exploring what they, what a value of a CR would be. They did do some investigation in 2013, and then redone in 2015 or 16, 2013, they did it with Beals and Thomas, and then 2016 Landvest redid it, exploring what a development might look like. And it was all a fitting with the 2-acre zoning.
Yep.
So it wasn't a 40B. It was what I am worried about is that that they could get, their board is fiscally responsible for making sure that assets of of the organization are not squandered. And so if a big national developer like Pulte came in and waved a whole bunch of money in front of them, they probably would have a hard time refusing it, even if they preferred to do a less dense development. And if it was Pulte, it would be a 40B, in which case really doesn't matter that we have an open space.
Right, but it could be toll and it's not a 40B. I mean, we don't, the point, Amy, is
We
that we
don't,
don't.
no,
but
we don't.
know.
we
And I
don't
don't want to
know.
spend a lot of time on Hale tonight, but we don't
Right.
know. So.
We
so
don't
the
know.
question- Right,
And-
we
But
don't
I guess
know.
the answer is no, Hale is not holding us up for ransom. They have in the past looked at what it would be, but was much more, it was a, open space friendly development in partnership with Landvest.
Well, I only bring up when we think about where to put natural, and this will come up a little bit later in the evening, where we put natural resource protection zoning and priorities, in that when Mr. Snyder put 46 Springdale before the town.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
not arguing that we
I know,
want to
no, I know, I'm
get
just
our
letting
ducks
everybody-
in order. I'm just saying
Right.
that Hale
understand. Thank
is not,
I got it,
Hale is not
got it.
hold us up for
Right,
ransom.
yeah. No, that's good to know. But on a similar topic, when the developer that had signed the purchase and sale with Jimmy Snyder for 46 Springdale came before the selectmen, he said to us, if you had some different zoning, we would love to think about a natural resource protection zoning, a cluster zoning, low impact development zoning opportunity at 46 Springdale. And we had absolutely no zoning to do it back then, and we have absolutely no zoning to do it now. So I think as we think about where we prioritize our time for fiscal year 24, we have to keep in mind that by not having anything other than our standard subdivision zoning, it does limit us in so many ways and just increases the risk. So, if there's no one discussion with Val, you feel that you've got a good sense of the board as you and committee continue to work?
Yes, thank you. This is great. We were kind of thinking along the same lines, so I'm glad to hear that the planning board members are also, we're all on the same page.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to updates at almost any meeting, given the way you guys are working on all this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is a review of the ADU regulations. This will be discussed by Jody and Laura. And this is the final step now that the bylaw has been approved. And let's give a round of applause
18.
to Jody and the team. It was fantastic, overwhelming support through a tremendous amount of hard work. So thank you. Now all we had to do is put together the regulations that are basically the process that will be used. And so I'm going to turn it over to Laura and to Jody.
Great. Laura, maybe you could start by giving everybody the timeline. What comes next in this process? And then we can go into the regulations themselves.
Okay, sure, because I'm looking for, okay, here they went. I did check in with Nina Pickering Cook, and there does have to be a public hearing. I'm assuming that it would be the standard public hearing process where there would be 2 advertisements. The first one having to be 14 days before the public hearing. So that would mean that the public hearing would be on June 5th, which is out a little further than I think any of us would like, but I think that's where you have to be. So during that time, I would suggest also working with the zoning board and making sure they're aware of what the planning board is intending to do as far as the site plan review process, because that's, what dovetails in with the zoning board special permit on the detached ADUs. On the attached, it's really all planning board, so you don't need to do that. So I
was-
think, I think we can kind of keep it simple.
Yes, that was my
And-
big question of the
yeah.
regulations that you sent over was like, does the ZBA have to now develop a set of regulations and have a public hearing as well?
I don't think they have to, and I think where you're doing, the planning board is doing the site plan review for both. I would just kind of put both under your regulations.
Right,
And
and I
then if
like
the
how you
zoning
did
board
that.
wants to do something for special permits, hey,
Okay.
that's fine.
So maybe the strategy is we come to agreement of what these regulations should be. And then I bring it to Alan Fryer and say, this is our proposed draft regulation that we plan to have a public hearing on June 5th.
Yeah,
I want to give you this heads up in the event that you want to be
Yeah.
reactive to it or something like that. I mean, that's basically it.
yeah, I think that should work. I
Does
mean,
that sound right to you,
everything.
Carol?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so Laura sent two versions, one a day or two ago, whatever that was, and then another one this afternoon. So I think we should be looking at your newer one. So thank you for that, because if you don't mind bringing it up, because it did in fact address my questions, most of them.
Oh, good,
By
okay.
clarifying that exact point, because my big question was, seems weird to be making regulations that would have anything to do with the ZBA, since we already got into trouble on that one, so I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Um,
Are you seeing some regulations in front of you?
no,
that-
we're not.
Nope,
You're not?
No.
Okay. Okay, well, let me just try this again. Sorry about that. Share screen, share, okay. Share. How about now?
Yes, thank you.
here we go.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so like section 1A was my first question. I love the more clarifying language in just number 1 in general, but 1A where we said for site plan review or for special permit and I thought, wait, now we're getting into that problematic point where we're telling people what to do when it comes to the ZBA.
Yeah, so I'm trying to bring the focus back to
Yeah.
just the site plans. And this is just what they have to give you in the application.
Yep.
So there's going to be a form that has little blanks for what's the floor area of the ADU, what's the floor area for the primary dwelling, what's the percent, things like that.
Is that a form that we as a board need to vote on, or is that just a process document that we can do whatever we want?
I think it's a process document. We can do whatever we want.
I just remember a couple of years ago, we went through a whole overview of all the forms, and I didn't know if that was like just again, process, we do what we want, or if that was more oversight on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's really necessary, but if you want to see them, I mean, we could certainly bring them out during, one of the updates at a meeting and just, kind of show and tell.
Yeah, no, I don't need, it might be nice for everybody to see them just so we're all on the same page, but that was just my question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So where we have had some of the ownership issues, we are looking for a deed or a purchase and sale. And, or if there's a trust, whatever documents are needed to identify the application as the trustee. I think you want a statement from the owner saying that, yes, they're going to reside in, whichever unit. Just so you have that down in writing.
Excuse me, Laura, I think that's a great idea. May I suggest a little bit clearer language there, though, while we're on
Okay,
it?
sure.
So I would suggest we say something like a narrative statement explaining the proposal, including a statement of the owner's plans to reside at, or in, I should say, in the ADU or primary residence. In other words,
Okay.
use the language that we use in the bylaw, which is primary residence or ADU.
That's a good idea.
I have a comment to that too, Carol, and that is that while someone might initially, an owner might initially reside in one of the units, the question becomes is for how long? Meaning they build the ADU, they live in the unit next door for 4 or 5 years, and then they rent out both. So might we
No,
consider
That was prohibited in the bylaw that we passed. The bylaw
you.
requires one or the other.
Thanks, Jody.
So they could move into the ADU and rent out the house.
That's it.
Yeah, they could. Then you want to have some plan showing all the alterations to the building that they're going to be making, the existing house or new construction, whatever it is. Where are their property lines? What are the setbacks? Where's the parking? Is there any screening? What's the access? I don't know if anyone can think of anything else that should go on there.
Well, we always seem to get wrapped around a little bit about where the septic systems are, which would be
Just
relevant
like-
for a detached.
Okay, yep. Okay,
So in that case, we'd want to see the septic as well as the wellhead.
yeah,
Or the Board of Health would probably require that anyway for detached ADU, actually.
yeah. Yeah,
Well, aren't they gonna see it in any case? Because we're saying that in the ADU, step 1 is go to the Board of Health. And the Board of Health is likely requires that anyway, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they should. I mean, it might be good just to have it follow
Yeah,
through.
may as well have a complete
Plan.
packet. Yeah, I totally agree.
Are we
Um,
requesting, and I know that we currently don't, a memo from the Board of Health stating that, you know, if they're not making changes to their septic, that it is compliant with any additions that they're adding for an EDU?
I think that's in 2A on the.
Yeah, it's procedure.
Ah, perfect. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
But to your point, it doesn't say we need it in writing from the Board of Health. It says prior to submitting the application, applicant shall consult. And my assumption is that the planning staff would be communicating with the Board of Health. Is that how it would typically work, or would we be?
Typically, you would get something in writing. I mean, I didn't know what you were accustomed to in Dover, and I haven't seen a lot of input from other departments on some of the site plans, but yeah, you certainly should get, I mean, I was thinking on the application of having a place for the Board of Health to sign it, that, you know, yes, this is, you know, the septic system has been approved, or a septic system could be approved in their opinion, based on the information that the applicant provided.
Yeah,
but you could
literally
yeah.
put on the application that for them to include the date of the meeting with the Board of Health or whatever, and, you know.
I would like to have something in writing.
Yeah, I would too.
Yeah,
We've talked about this, you know, we've had some sloppy stuff in the
Right.
past where so-and-so staff guy
Yeah.
said this, staff guy said
Right.
that. Well, are you sure? And it's just not, it's not good practice.
I think it's also important to have a record, a written record with the
Totally
staff
agree.
turnover that we've had, and with questions having to go back in history, looking at things. I think having a written record is really important.
Are we allowed to require another board to do something?
Well, the bylaws, yes, because the bylaw was approved by the Board of Health.
Yeah.
And it said that they need to review it and accept it, so.
Okay.
I
So it's
think-
probably a good idea to just we'll run this by the Board of Health as well, these
Yeah,
regulations.
but I do think we should add in 2A, step 1,
Yep, I agree.
that it's in writing.
Yep. Okay, a written memo in case there's any doubt about that.
Yeah, and it goes in the packet.
Okay, so coming back to 1A, you're gonna ask them for a floor plan showing the room layout before and after, so that you can kind of track what's going on. And then you want them to provide a calculation of the floor area with detail to show how they determined it. I mean, if they've got a living room that's, 15 by 25, they kind of write that down and add
Okay.
it all up. I mean, it's pretty basic stuff, but I think it really helps the applicant as much as anybody else to kind of go through this.
The other item that might not be a bad idea to include in this is that it also shows ingress and egress, since that is a requirement of the,
Okay, that's great.
just so we don't have to guess.
Okay. Listing structure. Yes. Okay, great.
We want to have any wording about showing finished and unfinished square footage. And I'm just thinking, so what if someone has an ADU with attic space that's unfinished, but has the potential to be finished in the future?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and it actually specifically came up at town meeting. The woman who wanted to change the bylaw during town meeting,
Oh, yes.
remember? And
Yes.
and actually I think the workaround for her is that it's a secondary structure on her property. It exists already, but she's only going to finish off 900 square feet as the ADU. She could theoretically, could she use the rest of the space for an art studio or something else, was her question.
Yep, and the answer is yes.
Okay, so somewhere in here, we're going to say, in either case, bedrooms and versus unfinished space.
Do you specifically call out bedrooms because of what?
I don't,
It's because of the septic system. It's really key to designing the septic system, how many bedrooms you have.
No, it's how many rooms they consider for the septic. It's not just bedrooms. That's the issue. So the way the Board of Health regulations are now, if you're building a new house and you have 5 bedrooms that we would all consider to be bedrooms, and you have a room on the second floor that has a door and a closet, and your intent is to make it into an office, they consider it, quote, a bedroom for the purposes of septic design. So they've expanded the definition significantly the last couple of years. So
Okay, well, if you want
I
me
wanna
to
get whatever
add, I can put,
language-
I mean, I know what
Yeah,
you're saying
yeah.
is true. If you want me to say, in either case, rooms considered bedrooms according to the definition of the Board of Health.
or in either case, all rooms should be clearly identified. Just, you could do something like that too. And let the Board of
Okay.
Health decide whether they want to categorize it as
Yeah.
a space that's part of their calculation.
right, because it shouldn't really matter to us once we have some memo from the Board of Health saying yes or
Right.
no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so all rooms should be labeled.
Sure.
There, oops. Sorry.
Then you had the bit about finished versus unfinished space.
All rooms should be labeled as to their use and finished versus unfinished space should be clearly identified. Okay,
And you've got the
Okay.
English address, right? Yeah.
yeah, I've got that up higher. So, okay, a calculation of the floor area of the house and of the ADU shall be included with show how it was determined. Okay. Okay, and then you want exterior elevations just to make sure that they're continuing the character
Yeah. I
and they're
think
not
that's
doing
important.
something bizarre
Yep.
architecturally. And you do have all those architectural standards.
Yep.
Okay, so 3 paper copies, an electronic file of all the application materials. The electronic is for transmission to all of you and to other departments. And then we get into the procedure for approval. We've got the consultation with the Board of Health. They have to consult. And the Board of Health shall provide a written memo to the planning board stating the date of their review and their, I think instead of approval, because approval of the septic system means they've spent thousands of dollars, and the Board of Health may be able to determine that the septic is adequate without that. So I'm just going to say determination of the adequacy of the septic system.
Mhm. I think that's vague enough because maybe they're proposing a new septic system.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so then, okay, I think we kind of already said this. Okay, we can take this first sentence out and just say, the planning board shall provide the building inspector, Board of Health, and Conservation Commission with copies of ADU applications for their review, comment, and recommendation.
This was an area that I was a little confused on because my understanding was that our, in our FAQs, when we said, how would you begin this process? It was that the process would begin at the building inspector's office because he would identify that there was an ADU going in and then notify the planning board.
Well,
Could be either way, I guess.
Yeah, well, let me just, kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent. So I got a phone call today from, well, first of all, I had a conversation with Walter because at our, what he calls the inspectors meeting, he had mentioned that he's been getting all kinds of phone calls about ADUs. They were a lot as far as he was concerned. And so I said to him, I said, if you want, I think they can come to the planning board. And then since, they come for the site plan review, regardless, it really won't be any problem for us to talk things through with them.
Mhm.
So I think he's still thinking about that, but he has a point of view about when applications can be accepted, which is somewhat different from my understanding. And it may be something where we need to consult with Nina. I'm not sure, but I did get a phone call from a resident who was very upset because she wants to get going on the process. And anyway, she was in tears, actually. So
What's she upset about? Sorry, I don't understand. I'm not.
okay. Walter thinks we can't accept any applications until the Attorney General has approved the
Okay,
bylaw.
that's what we're talking about. Okay.
That could take a couple of months. I mean, that's something we have no control over. And
We've
if
been
people,
saying that though, in all of our meetings.
you've been saying that in all the meetings?
Well, don't you recall,
Okay.
Carol, that somebody asked us that, I feel like, specific question, and we said, well, it can take a few months, but somebody came to the planning board. I remember she had long dark hair and she
Yeah.
was inquiring about an ADU, and we specifically said to her, stay tuned. We're going to bring this to town meeting in May, and then it's going to go to the Attorney General, and then you'll be able to apply.
Okay, well, that's fine. And that's really good for me to know, because it's a conservative way of interpreting when you can go and get a permit, but it's certainly understandable to do it that way. So I'll just call her
You
back.
guys tell me what you think. I don't mean to, make that decision for the group. I'm happy either way. I don't care. But to me, like, what's the downside of being a little bit conservative on it? We've come this far.
Hey, Judy, do you remember who drafted those FAQs?
I did.
Okay, so you drafted them and you said step one was to go to the building department. correct?
Yeah, because we talked about that, like
Yeah.
that was a specific question I had, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I do agree with your point about consistency, and if we needed any further clarification, wouldn't Nina be able to give us a little guidance in this area, maybe relative to what other towns are doing? Because we don't necessarily, I think as long as we get to sort of self-impose what language we want, we don't really mind too much what the process is, as long as it's a sort of a proven effective process. And
Right.
I would think probably other towns could serve as some guidance in that.
Yeah, I mean, in our FAQs, it says, how would I get permission to build an ADU? We said, upon receipt of the building permit application or the building inspector determining that the plans include an ADU, the building department will notify the planning department of the proposed ADU, blah, blah, blah.
Got it.
Okay.
And that was only because, Laura, we talked about that. I would never have known that rule. So it's, and which
Okay.
either way is fine, is fine, but just for consistency's sake, and despite that, it's, a little bit more of a weight for people. If Walter feels strongly about it, then it doesn't bother me. Carol, I don't know if you have a point of view on that.
No, I think it's a good point. Two points. Let me just go back for a second. I think that it's always been my understanding that despite the fact that something gets a bylaw, a zoning bylaw, or any bylaw gets approved at town meeting, that it still has to go up the chain to Beacon Hill
Right.
to be authorized. That is correct, especially in something like this, where we did the 50% specifically as it related to a state law. You'd expect the Attorney General to make sure that it's totally kosher when it comes to the 50% and the state law regs. So as frustrating as it is, and goodness knows, I think we all empathize with folks because we know that there's this pent up demand. I think we have no choice but to wait. Now, that being said, we, and I'll use the term we in general, whether it's the building inspector or the planning board for a second, but we certainly can speak to and help the prospective applicant understand what's going to be necessary
How to get ready.
so
Yes.
that they can start the process and be ready to go, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think that we can accept an application until we know that it's being accepted under an fully approved bylaw.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. The other issue that came up with this woman, and I think what was upsetting to her in particular, was she had been told that because the outbuilding that she wanted to convert was, I'm sorry, it was not an outbuilding, it was a second floor of a house that she wanted to convert to an ADU, that was 1,100 square feet. And she was told that she absolutely could not do that because it had to be 900, the whole footprint had to be exactly 900 square feet. So that was a little confusing to me, because when you're talking about attached ADUs, you're going to have a lot of spaces where the footprint is bigger or smaller, and you can add on, but it's not going to be exactly 900 square feet.
Well,
So
Laura,
We never said anything in our bylaw about footprint. We talked about a self-contained unit that was 900 square feet. If there's an 1,100 square foot attic and they put in a kitchen, a bedroom, and a bathroom with its separate ingress and egress, and it's not accessible through the other 200 square feet, then it's an ADU,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think some of this is going to boil down to whether or not things like the stairwell that leads to the ADU get included in the square footage of the ADU, but I don't think that's really necessary. If there's a wall with a door that's off the stairwell, then I don't think you include the stairwell.
well,
So is this something that-
if someone was in that scenario looking to request an ADU, wouldn't that just be a question of coming to before the board for a variance and pleading their case?
You mean because they wanted it to be bigger than 900
Yeah,
square feet?
then, yeah.
I mean, that's
exactly.
another option, and that was exactly the scenario that was presented at town meeting by this woman. And we
Where-
said to her, that's what variances are for. That's sort of what I understood that to be, if she wanted it bigger. And then the ZBA has the opportunity grant it or not grant it. My guess is they want to be consistent on that, but that's kind of
But that's a great point, but that might be a little bit different than what this person was specifically asking, right? In other words, did she want an 1,100 square foot ADU? Was she willing to go down to 900 square feet if it was explained to her how to do it? And right, and this gets into the issue of the planning board's intent, the underlying state law, and the building inspector's interpretation and intent.
Yeah, she had no thought at all of trying to make it 1,100 square feet.
Right.
She wanted it to be 900, but there seemed to be a problem, at least she perceived there, she felt she had been told that that wouldn't be possible.
by
So
Walter.
it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. And I just hope it all plays out along the lines that you intended.
Well, which is why despite the FAQ, it might be nice to have a conversation. So it might be nice for people who want to do an ADU to talk to the planning board first, the planning board's office first, to the town planner before starting with the building inspector.
That's true, as long as the town planner and the building inspector are on the same page. Because you don't want the town planner to give somebody advice, they go, they spend all the money on drawing things up, and then the building inspector disagrees.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Well,
we
I
don't
think
want
we-
folks, but we don't want folks going to the building inspector getting turned down, maybe without some nuance and flexibility,
Yeah,
right? So it works both ways.
We may need to have some kind of sit down
yeah. sounds
with
like it.
Walter. You know, I'm just gonna play it by ear, see
Yeah.
how it goes. But I think the other benefit to having them come in to the planning board is you can draw things on the back of an envelope and look at someone's house plan that's on the assessor's records and kind of play around with it a little bit and see, you know, what's where, and do they have a septic system that maybe was over-designed and they've got enough septic capacity for another bedroom? I mean, you can kind of sift through a lot of information, which I think the building department, as busy as they are, they just don't have time to deal with things like that. I mean, and I'm not saying that disparagingly about them. I think they work exceedingly hard over there. But, you know, to kind of hold people's hand going through the process and tell them, oh, it's not really such a big deal, or, you know, gee, this one looks like it's really going to be a big deal. I mean, whatever you think, you know, you share with them. And, you know, I think it gives people a little confidence.
Well, that's
So-
exactly what we do at other site plan reviews too, right? There are
Yeah.
often folks coming in, whether they're homeowners or developers, to sit down with the town planner and say, here's what I'm thinking, blah, 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 whatever, right? So why would we treat ADUs differently?
Right.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
at the point that you come in with your application for a site plan review, you want to have this buttoned up because it's a lot of money to pull all that material together.
Right,
Yeah.
which is why you come in first and have that informal chat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so good. So I think we're kind of on the same page. So, so with the detached ADUs, I tried to spell out that this was, these
Can you
procedures
go
are
back
in
up
connection.
Laura, sorry, just back up just a tiny bit
Yep.
to you. Why the Conservation Commission?
Just because if they're building like a new, well, this was for attached, wasn't it? I guess they could be, expanding their house.
Right.
I mean, that one wouldn't be all of them. I think it would just be for expansions if they're near a wetland.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
but
wetland
normally-
setbacks,
Sorry, what?
wetland setbacks.
Right, but not everybody has to go, everybody has to go to the building inspector and the Board of Health, but not everybody has to go to the Conservation Commission, correct? Or
But the planning board will decide that. It says the planning board shall provide.
Yeah, okay, and I can put here,
Yeah.
and as needed.
Right, okay,
Yep.
great.
Conservation Commission. I
Great,
don't know why,
thank you.
yeah. Okay, so, let's see here. So I'm trying to make clear that with the detached, that the
Yeah.
reason we're getting involved with that is just for the site plan review part. We're not trying to tell the ZBA how to do their special permit process. And then I may have to make some changes to agree with what you have. The changes that you gave me.
Yeah,
up
the
on
memo,
top.
the memo business, yes.
Okay. Okay, so let me just. Okay. Okay, so I can maybe make a final revision and send it around, and maybe if. Joe, if everyone could let me know if they have any comments, and particularly you, Jody, if you could
Yes,
kind of
will
go
do.
through it
So
with a
I
fine
can
tooth
comment
comb.
back on email on this, right? This is,
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
I think, yeah, okay. Okay, great, so
thank you very
that's
much,
that.
Laura. Thanks.
Thank you
so much.
all.
Great, no, thank you. So the plan will be, you'll update this, you'll get it reviewed, Jody will pay particular attention to it. You'll get all the announcements in for public hearing to be held on June 5th.
Laura, you'll do that, right?
Carl will
Yes.
do that,
Okay.
yep. And then we'll plan on approving it at the June 19th meeting.
So between now and that meeting, I will also reach out to the Board of Health.
Yep.
To the
And-
ZBA.
Yep.
And Laura, it might be worth sitting down together with Walter, just to have a
Sure.
conversation, just
Yeah,
because we
sure.
want him on our team. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and yeah, okay, that's great. So I'm
Thank you
gonna
so
stop sharing and come back.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great work, Jody.
Thanks.
Great work.
Will be nice to just get this one behind us. It would be nice to see some ADUs get built, but I'm
Yeah,
sure it will be very
exactly.
complicated every single.
Exactly.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of interest.
Yep.
I think there is, yeah.
Okay, so with that, we'll move on to planning board chair updates. I just, the expiration date for receipt of job applications for the town planning position closed on May 1st. We received 4. One of them being an individual that we had interviewed previously. And I have 2 meetings on Thursday, one with our interim town administrator, Carl Valenti, and Rick Reed, who is our interim HR director. And then a meeting in the afternoon with the town of Sherburne to talk about sharing a position. So my position is that sharing a position is better than having no town planner, but it's not acceptable on any kind of long-term basis.
Mm.
And that we really need to explore how we get a good, qualified, experienced town planner when there are many, many, many other towns and cities in Massachusetts and Metro West looking for the same thing. And that's going to be part of my conversation with Carl and Rick, as to viewing this position with the same import and therefore a similar process as we would view the job search for a town administrator or for a police chief. So stay tuned on that. And we'll see what we can get done with that. So I think I sent around, or Laura sent around a quick Word document that showed the fiscal year 23 activities and the fiscal year 24 initiatives. Laura, if you could pull that up, that would be great. So it's hard to believe that we have Laura for another 3 or 4 weeks. So this is full scotch, no. So I just wanted to go over what Laura and I have talked about for her to get done while we still have her expertise available to us. As we just talked about, the floodplain and the ADU bylaws need to get to the Attorney General. Laura's working with Sue on that. That's something that Sue has done in the past. And it's a pretty, check mark type application to the AG, so that should not be too much of an issue. And we'll just have Sue follow up on a regular basis to make sure that we get final approval. I think last year, the bylaw got approved by the Attorney General's office sometime in August or September, if memory serves me. The good news is that we have $95,000 of money in our operating budget that was approved at town meeting for consultants. So the next step obviously is to find some consultants. So Laura is helping us with that, is putting some thought into and reaching out to various consultants that can be used for the initiatives that we're going to talk about in just a moment for fiscal year 24. And the other thing that needs to be done that we just talked about is the ADU regulations. So I feel pretty comfortable that the major activities that we need to get done by the end of June and before Laura leaves, are all underway. And will be successful. So on to the, Laura, do you have it or you want me to send it to you? Jody?
I think maybe you better send it to me. I'm looking.
Jody, do you
but
have it by any
I-
chance?
I do. Hold on, let me just open up that.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the one you sent earlier today.
Yes, I think so.
Yes. Okay. How do we
Yeah,
edit?
No, easement rules and regs.
Yeah, rules and regs.
Oh, that's funny. Did it come as part of the regular packet or in a separate email?
No, I don't think I sent it as part of the
No,
regular
It was
packet.
a
Oh, okay,
separate
that's
email. I think it was from me.
Okay, hold on, I'll open it then. I printed it, but I didn't save it in the folder. Hold on.
Okay.
Please review prior. Nope, that was Amy Moot.
Well, time constraints,
A list of
easements.
items. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
Got it. Great.
Okay, let's see if I can share this. I think you need to make me a host.
Okay. All right. See here. Screen chat participants.
Yeah, if you go to the
Is it at the bottom,
participants and click the little, if you go to open,
Whiteboards.
double
tabs.
click on the word participants,
Okay.
and then you see Jody and you go to the more, or actually
Okay.
what are you looking at?
Make host, make co-host.
Oh yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Great.
Hopefully. Okay.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for that, let's we'll start in. So there we go. Great, thank you.
Okay, great.
Okay, so MBTA Communities Act, I'll just remind everybody and understand and appreciate the fact that it's during the workday. But if you can make it, we do have a meeting scheduled with the selectmen and the consultant on June 7th. I think you've received the details on it. To make sure that the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board are on the same page relative to continuing to meet the requirements of the MBTA Communities Act. I think I did send you all the article from a newsletter about Westwood and how the Attorney General's reaction to Westwood's claim that they're in compliance and the AG's claim that they are not. So please let me know if you're going to be able to attend it. And as I said, I certainly appreciate that many of you will not be able to. And maybe what we'll try to do is make sure that that gets recorded so that everybody can hear it. And those consulting dollars are being paid for by the state. So at this point, it doesn't have a budgetary impact on us, just a time impact on us. Val has already started to work, I believe, Val, with Laura on phase 2 and what that means from a grants, either grants or consultants. Anything to add on that?
No, she and I talked about if we were to do the natural resource protection zoning, having somebody assist us with writing that bylaw, or if we end up going in a different direction and need to do just an individual standalone tree preservation bylaw, having somebody help us with that.
So the, bear with us for a second while I find the folder. So we have, I'll send it out separately. We have separate, when we submitted the operating budget, we had separate consulting dollars for the natural resource protection zoning versus the trees.
Great.
So I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but
I think the trees, you can do a lot with the stormwater bylaw, as Val was talking about a little bit earlier. And one source for that might be MAPC. I don't know if you've used them for bylaws at all, but they have done a lot of work on local stormwater bylaws. And they might be able to take whatever Tata is doing and work with that. And work with Kevin, obviously.
well, I would view this stormwater anything that's done in the stormwater bylaw, I would view as part of the DPW budget.
Okay,
What we're doing is trying to work with them to get our tree perspective.
okay.
It's where possible. But we can use the money any way we wish that was given to us by the town. No, certainly we try to do it in a way that that the town approved, but the let's see, the tree preservation, we allocated $15,000. Val, we allocated $25,000 for the village center. And $15,000 for the NRPZ. And $35,000 for the zoning diagnostics. So that's the $90,000. If we have to reallocate it, then we reallocate it, either because one project ends up being a little bit more expensive or our priorities change. But that's basically the allocation that we have right now. So I would try to use those funds to look at aspects of the tree committee priorities as distinct from things that can fall into a stormwater bylaw. As you work with Kevin, Val. Village center.
Except for if we don't have a full-time planner, aren't we gonna need some consulting help if we're thinking about a Kevin / stormwater bylaw, who's gonna be writing that?
If we don't have a full town planner, quite frankly, folks, I'm not exactly sure what we're going to be doing.
Okay, gotcha.
The issue isn't, yes, it is an
Gotcha, it's
issue, but
bigger.
there's actually a bigger issue.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, all of it becomes very tenuous, yeah. Okay.
All of it becomes very tenuous, exactly.
Carol,
Exactly.
I really like the way you just put that.
Yeah, the understatement of the year.
Yeah.
So, Bill, we haven't had a chance to catch up, and we probably should get together and talk to Laura as well about how best to proceed now in the village center.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly straightforward. It's just a question of, frankly, me finding the time to really invest and meet with you and Laura. I think that Brovitz and company, the consultants that we were working carefully with in the beginning of the year and the end of 22, did a very kind of comprehensive analysis of the village, and to the point where they provided us a document that was, and the final analysis, it was, very extensive, as Carol and Laura know, and really got into the gritty details of zoning and bylaw changes in the village, and rightly so. Carol said, look, this is just no way this could get approved. And so what we have to do is we've got to, and I think I don't think it's a heavy lift, candidly, is to really in their table of contents that they've provided for us, is to identify really on round one, what are our priorities for bylaw change. And I just think that's a discussion. And Carol, I need to go through this and say, these are the 5 areas that I think we should focus on. And I think you and Laura and I should talk it through. I think obviously, in addition to, so what are those core areas that sort of provide those guardrails, the preliminary guardrails that we've talked about? And I think we got to get buy-in just by the town on this concept of the village center. And what is the village center, right? It's pretty straightforward. I think we don't want to get granular here. So that's the work that's got to get done.
Okay, great. And we'll that, I think, very, very well said. And, we had, think back, originally we had talked about maybe doing something at this town meeting.
Yeah.
And we talked about, okay, there's a lot on the plate for this town meeting, and we were asked to move it to the fall town meeting, which we graciously accepted. But it's very possible that I think it's safe to say at this point in time that we would be looking at a May 2024 town meeting for this kind of bylaw. That being said, hey guys, we have been more successful in addressing zoning bylaws in the last 2 years than the last 8 or 9 years combined. So we've done a fantastic job of finding little important pieces and
Yeah.
getting it through. So,
But did I hear you correctly that this would not likely be a fall town meeting, special town meeting project, but more being pushed off to May of 24? Is that what I heard you say?
yes, yep.
Yeah.
For 2 reasons. One is we don't have a town planner.
Yeah. Well, you're
And,
gonna really see me drag my feet if that's the case.
and 2 is that it's not clear to me that we would even have the support to do something at a fall town meeting, because Hale is getting very complicated.
Yeah.
So I know that the selectmen are going to be addressing that over the next, once the Carroll Community Center, June 3rd, special town meeting occurs, they will then have to decide what they're going to do about a fall town meeting with Hale.
Well, that being said, though, I think that this is an important thing. I will continue to really drill down on it. And obviously there are some discussions that are going on in the village with, for example, the Dover Market site.
Yep.
And we do need to be somewhat proactive as best we can in terms of providing guidance and on that particular site as
Sure.
well.
And that being said, Bill, it's an excellent point. If you feel that based on those types of conversations, over the next weeks to come, that there is a need to get some very specific guardrails put into place as soon as possible, then we'll make our pitch for something in the fall town meeting. So,
Well, I guess, and I know it's getting late, so I don't want to take too much people's time, but part of the concern is that I think the future of the Dover Market is, and I don't think I'm speaking, I think this is more well known by now, is the future of that market somewhat in question. And I think that the owners of that site are sort of coming to the town saying, I'm looking for guidance from you guys, and to what extent we can provide guidance. I think there's a willingness to be cooperative and collaborative, whereas if we don't really sort of show the initiative, we might be following as opposed to leading, and that's not necessarily the right strategy, I think, from the town's perspective.
No, that's an excellent point. So I guess it's just it's a resource issue, really, resource and a focus.
Yeah,
on all of
yeah.
us.
I mean, Carol, you and I can talk about this more offline. But I do think that is a concern. That's
Yeah.
probably worth, further discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next on the list, very quickly, we'll go through the zoning diagnostics. That's been put off now for about 3 years. And we need to bite the bullet and get some consultants in here. And I've asked Laura to look into who she might recommend, whether it's a consultant, whether it's a zoning consultant or a legal zoning consultant, whatever, to get somebody in. We've got $35,000 for it. It's going to be an effort. But we know the initiatives of things that we want to do to move the town forward. What we don't have a good handle on until we have to turn to a page in the bylaw when we have a site plan review or an application and go, oh, look at this bylaw, is really how problematic these ancient bylaws are. And where the holes are, where the inconsistencies are, what are we missing? It came up in the solar array that the only solar bylaw we have is basically industrial size. And we have nothing that talks about smaller. I mean, these things come up. So I really would like to get going on a zoning diagnostics. All the other issues.
Excuse me, Carol, is it zoning diagnostic to come away with a roadmap of bylaw updates for like the next 5 years? Is that what we're trying to do?
Well, my understanding is that, yes, it can, but it also is for me, the primary purpose would be to take a look at our current laws and say, what is out of date? What is new language? Sort of like an ADU language, right? Versus an accessory apartment. What is no longer the law? What doesn't match best practices? Where are the inconsistencies? And where are our bylaws totally missing the boat on things that are occurring in zoning over the last 40 years, which is the last time that the zoning bylaws were increased. And those would tie to that category, as well as just the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it, but that's clearly something. You raise a very good point. That's a huge exposure on our part.
Yeah, and it puts us at risk. I mean, our subdivision bylaw, just as an absurd example, I think I've used it before. Our subdivision bylaw has pages of lists and lists and lists of trees that can be used in subdivisions. Now it's a list that's there, so you can't plant something that's not on that list. That list was done in 1980 or whenever it was, way before climate change, for instance. I mean, it's an absurd thing, but there's got to be stuff like that all over the place. So that's what it would do.
I'm sorry, what is you're opining on the sort of observed amount of detail or the concept, or?
Both. I'm just giving an example of how antiquated our bylaws are.
Yeah, and what don't apply anymore.
They may or may not apply anymore. They're out of date.
Okay, I don't, okay. That didn't seem crazy to me, but all right, that's fine.
But anyway, it's a massive undertaking.
I think I understand your point.
A bazillion cans of worms and like the whole
Exactly.
business, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And of course, we would say to them, and while you're at it, here are our initiatives. So take a look at it relative to what we want to accomplish, right? So to Jody's point, we've talked about easements, we've talked about stormwater management, we've talked about NRPZ. So that's where we are. Laura, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I think it's ambitious, but I thought that, when I first started with you all. So you can probably get it done if you really put your minds to it.
Well, we got a lot done when you put your mind to it too. So what's
So we're all about, Laura. We're the can-do
And
planning.
if I
board.
recall, we had more on our plate and then they asked us to bring less to town meeting.
Yeah, they did.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, there are conversations going on that are starting now that the first town meeting for the year is over about making it even shorter. And my comment has been, you can only make it short when there's not a lot of content that needs to be explained. And if there's content that needs to be explained, then you have to give it the time for people to understand and ask their questions. And that's what democracy is all about. So we have a little bit of tension, especially if we start going in with 5 or 6, zoning bylaws. Even if they're small chunks, they take time.
Mhm.
So we'll see how that conversation goes. This was a long meeting, but I guess if we balance it out to the last meeting, we're about on average. So there you go. Any other further comments? Questions? Feel free, folks, to go on to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts website. They have great websites about grant opportunities and so forth. I sent one to Val and to Laura. Feel free to explore when you have a moment, and provide information to Laura or to the planning board member that's taking lead on some of these topics. Our next meeting is on May 22nd. We're going to have the 78 Strawberry Hill site plan review. And think maybe a pool application. And then we'll have the open hearing, the public hearing on June 5th, which will be important.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Time. Thank you all for your
Well,
time.
Thank you, Carol.
Have a good evening.
We need to
Take
make
care,
a
you
motion and
too.
all that.
And, oh yeah, thank you. Right. I make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 9:33. Do I hear a second?
Second,
All in favor? Bill,
Aye.
George,
aye.
Jody,
Aye.
and Carol. Great. Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
See ya.
Night.
Good night, Carol.